Right, welcome to the SSAA Victoria Podcast. We've got some really interesting guests today. We've got Emma Bellot and Dr. Steve Headey from RMIT. So Emma's done her honours thesis on recreational hunting as a deer management tool in Victoria. So some really interesting new research that we're pretty keen to explore. Before that, we'll jump into just a little bit of news that we've got going on around the traps in SSAA Victoria. The big one at the moment, of course, is the Firearms Amendment Bill that's sitting before Parliament. So SSAA Victoria has put together a pretty comprehensive analysis and position on that bill. So this is the last bit of the Ken Lay review. This is the government enacting the changes that they said they were going to enact. So it includes some things that we're pretty comfortable with and a few things that we've got issues with that we're trying to work through with government at the moment. So things like continuing the firearm prohibition order scheme, that's fine. It's targeting criminals. The FPOs in the decade or so they've been in have been tested in the courts and they're at a pretty good place where they're only being applied where they should be applied, and where they're not, that's getting picked up and corrected. So don't have any real problems with them. There's a new power for the Chief Commissioner of Police to temporarily recategorise firearms. It's a bit of a funny one because the Chief Commissioner of Police already has that power. It's a realignment of how that power works and a clarification. Our concern with that is that the stated intent is that it's to be used for new technology, and we'll be looking to try and influence so that the legislation and the parliamentary debate makes it really clear that that's the narrow scope of that power, rather than broadening it out to a future Chief Commissioner or a future Minister just deciding to recategorise on a whim, because that's the sort of thing that could pretty easily happen in Australia.
And that's one that's certainly been of major concern to our membership. So people are really concerned about that one. So we are keeping a really close eye on it. But at this stage, there's really nothing to indicate that it's going to be anything sinister. But we'll keep watching that one.
Another change is in firearm trafficking offences. And again, this is clearly targeting criminals and graduating penalties that reflect the scale and the seriousness of the offences that they're committing. So really no problem from us with that. We're all for supporting law-abiding firearm owners, not the other type. So some more stuff on firearm prohibition order offences. Again, not a problem for us. The two we do have real issues with are the citizenship requirements, which we've covered extensively on the podcast before. The proposal to introduce a citizenship requirement for firearm licensing is not supported by compelling evidence. It would unnecessarily disadvantage lawful permanent residents who already hold a firearms licence, and it raises significant concerns, human rights concerns and practical concerns. The worst examples of that are people who are serving in the police force, for example, who are permanent residents and not citizens. And that's because their country of origin doesn't offer dual citizenship. So some do, some don't. It could certainly lead to a ridiculous situation where they're allowed to walk around and guard our Premier with a firearm, but they're not allowed to go to the range and have a few shots of a 22 to let off some steam after work. So need to make sure that whatever we can to do to shape that and get some safeguards in place is done. The other issue is the Commonwealth firearms background checks, the AUSCHECK stuff, which sounds like a really good idea, making sure that firearm licences are run through that check to make sure that terrorists aren't getting firearm licences. And it is a good idea. Our issue with that, which we've explained again on here before, is that there's no merits review if that check comes back wrong. So if or when the Commonwealth Government makes a mistake doing those checks, as they do, because these things are fallible and humans are fallible, there's actually no way for the person who's had that mistake made about them to find out even what the mistake was, let alone to have it rectified. So real natural justice concerns that we'll be trying to make sure Victoria doesn't follow the feds and follow other states and actually preserves natural justice for our citizens. The next one we've got that's happening at the moment, I'll give you a choice, Daryl.
Give me a choice.
Do you want to talk about Pagacha in the Pyrenees
Not really.
on stage 3 of the Tour de France, or do you want to talk about H5N1 avian influenza?
I'd rather be in the Pyrenees. I could talk about our new emerging diseases. Look, so the bird flu situation obviously has arisen in Australia, the H5N1 virus. It's always been on its way, so sort of 2022, and it's made its way around the Northern Hemisphere, and it's done a lap of the Northern Hemisphere pretty much, and it's made its way down into the Southern Hemisphere. It was always a case of when it got here, not if. But it's arrived. So there's, I think, 5 confirmed cases in Western Australia, 2 in South Australia, and 1 in New South Wales. So it would be safe to say that it is here in Victoria. We don't have a detected case, but if it's in South Australia and it's in New South Wales, probably
I did
assume
a
it's
webinar
here.
the other night with the chief vet, who was pretty well saying, the detection's going to lag a fair bit behind it actually being here.
So it's a when, not an if. But we're just going to have to deal with it. It is going to have, to think it won't have an impact on waterfowl hunting or quail hunting in Victoria, or even our waterfowl seasons in South Australia or the Northern Territory, which is coming up. I think it will have a major impact, but what that impact will be, who knows?
Yeah, well, the antis are already calling for a complete ban on hunting, trying
sure.
to use it as an excuse to do that.
Yeah, and they'll do that. It's just
As they do.
another thing they'll use. Look, it's been through the Northern Hemisphere. There's obviously waterfowl hunting right across, Europe, Scandinavia, the USA, Canada. They're all still hunting. Yes, they've modified things. Yes, they have quarantine areas. They've quarantined countries even. Certainly changed how they hunt, where they hunt, and I think we can expect something similar here. We have been down this path a little bit before. In 2024, we had the H7N3 and the H7N9 in the western state in 2024, and during the ducks, which was during the winter, it was quite a miss the duck hunting season. But in 2025, we certainly had the I'm good at this, N7H8, which ended up with some quarantine areas around the Eurola. Area, which
impacted your hunting area.
Or it just happens that one of the places I hunt was right in the middle of it, and a lot of my friends that I hunt with, etc., all live within that quarantine area. So,
H5N1 is a different beast.
It's very different. So this disease has killed millions of birds. It's not, we're not waving the flag and trying to scare the general public. It has killed millions of birds, and water birds in particular are susceptible to the disease.
And it's particularly a problem for poultry breeders, for the commercial sector.
Oh, it could wipe out poultry farming.
But a large part of the management, as it's been with these other outbreaks, is avoiding sick or injured birds, and water birds and migratory water birds are going to be pretty good at carrying and shedding this thing.
Yeah, sure. It's safe to say that it got here through the migratory birds. Then they'll be water birds. They all interact with our duck population, so safely say that it'll go through the waterfowl population pretty quickly. But yeah, the focus in Victoria needs to be, on the industry side, on the poultry side. Duck hunting's going to have to come second or third behind, public safety, and just the looking after the resource itself. I think the hunting bit comes after all those things.
Yeah, and obviously that's going to have an impact on our members and other hunters out there, but I think we were pretty happy with the way AgVic handled the last one. It was evidence-based, it was proportionate, and would expect them to do the same this time. But I think come next duck season, we're certainly going to see significant impacts on this.
Yeah, so I guess we just need to discuss some of the stuff around it. Hunting seasons are over in Victoria, but people will be hunting in other states. So a couple of things that we need to do is make sure that we don't handle or touch any of those sick wound. If you do see any of those sick birds, not to handle them at all, because it will help spread the virus. Some steps we need to follow: so avoid contact with them, record what you see, report wildlife sickness to authority. So DECA's running the lead in Victoria. If you're in another state, just report via the state agency, because there's some federal reporting stuff as well that you can find on Google, but we'll stick some stuff in the show notes too about some of the reporting stuff. So record what you see and report wildlife sicknesses, so to DECA in Victoria or federally as well. So things you need to report are clusters of 5 or more sick or dead birds, so any type of bird. But if it's waterfowl or seabirds, we're talking about 1, even if you see sick or dead, dying water birds or marine mammals, they need to be reported fairly soon, instantly. So the signs you're looking for in the wild birds: they can't stand, they can't walk, and they can't fly properly. Droopy or puffed up appearances, breathing problems, unusual head or neck posture, and sudden death, especially in large numbers. So any of those things need to be reported, ASAP.
All right, I'm sure we'll keep talking about this as the year progresses.
Unfortunately, it's a bit of a case of wait and see, so we'll see how we go.
All right, and Dave, on the last edition of the Trav Dowling podcast with SSAA Victoria, we spoke about Outdoor Recreation Victoria, this new authority we're getting called Outdoor Recreation Victoria.
We were getting.
Yes,
What's
we were
happening
getting
with our new authority that we did a whole podcast on called Outdoor Recreation Victoria, Dave?
So it's no longer Outdoor Recreational Victoria. It is now Fishing, Hunting and Outdoor Victoria, which probably isn't necessarily a bad thing because fishing and hunting is the primary sort of objectives of it. So I don't think it hurts to have that in the name. That was one of a number of amendments that came through when it went to the upper house. Some good, some not so good. But it was supposed to come in on the 1st of July. The new authority was supposed to commence. It's now going to be sometime in August, and we're not sure exactly when. But those amendments have gone through. It's now got to go back through the lower house and then should all be signed off and should kick away. So it is happening. So
it will be a bit of an interesting one when part of their mandate is to regulate boating, fall driving, and other outdoor activities, and so it's going to. It's an interesting one.
A bit of a remit there. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, as long as they're adequately resourced to deliver what they've been told they've got to deliver.
Hopefully we won't see endless name changings to fishing, hunting, foil driving, camping, boating, and outdoor Victoria. It could be a really. They're going to need bigger shirts to get the logo on there.
Going with previous history of various
It'll
government
change every
departments,
3 years
it will
anyway.
change. Yes. So, but I don't know. It's exciting to see when it's going to come in, and watch this space.
The parliamentary debate around it in the upper houses, as well as being long, had some interesting
It's
bits.
long,
So some really positive contributions, and positive contributions from people who we didn't necessarily expect them from. So Ryan Batchelor's an honourable mention there as somebody who's made his position on things like duck hunting really clear, but who made a very practical, common sense and respectful contribution to the debate. So it's worth acknowledging. I was watching it, I must confess, wanting to hate it, and I didn't. So
Did you watch it all, Barry?
I did.
How
watch
late
it
did you
all.
go?
It's about a bit after 3 in the morning.
I didn't make it. I didn't make it to 3 in the morning.
I was in at Parliament and
I
took
bailed.
off at about 10, but then couldn't sleep, so watched it till about 3 in the morning. So that was fun.
But I think that it is something important. I mean, we are critical of various politicians at times, and we have been critical of Ryan Batchelor in the past. Very, very upfront about that. We weren't happy. But, when those people do the right thing, we need to acknowledge that as well and say, well done. So that was good.
And when they do the wrong thing, so the 3 or 4 weeks before that debate, there was a frontbencher. He's the Shadow Environment Minister for the Coalition, for the Liberal Party. So person who would have a fair bit of sway were they to be in government, was running around doing his best animal rights spiel to every media outlet and everyone who would listen, and stood up in Parliament and made a straight-out anti-hunting animal rights speech. What's notable about that, of course, is that when you're in one of those major political parties, what you do is as important as what you say. So when it came time for Nick McGowan to actually stand up for what he said he believed in, so when it came time to vote, he kept his arse firmly planted on the seats with his parliamentary colleagues.
Did what he was told.
He did what he was told. He can talk the talk, McGowan, but I don't know if he can walk the walk.
Might leave that one alone.
Okay. So anyway, we're not going to do that sort of treatment to our 2 guests today.
Wow.
Depends what we say, obviously.
Well, Steve, you've opened yourself up. So
And Emma's waiting for her results still.
Emma's still waiting. Emma's still waiting for a result. So Emma's done this thesis for her honours in a Bachelor of Applied Science, Environmental Science, and done this pretty hefty thesis. You said this is the first time you've seen it printed out.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in hard copy version.
There you go.
It's quite a heavy document. And it's titled, "Oh Deer, Recreational Hunting as a Method of Deer Management in Victorian National Parks."
It's a good title.
It's a great
you.
title.
Bonus points.
The title's like the hardest part, honestly. Like there's 50 pages worth of stuff in there. You've got to pick what you want to
And if
summarise
you read through it, it does what it says on the title, which is pleasing. So really want to get into some of the research and some of the thesis, but maybe just a bit about yourselves first. So Emma, your background, what drew you to environmental science?
Yeah, so I live in country Victoria, so I live in Bendigo, and a lot of my childhood and growing up, I did a lot of stuff outside. So I really loved outdoor ed in high school, massive fan of just getting out there and just actually not inside at a desk, obviously. And so at the end of high school, I was thinking, oh, I could go do outdoor ed, but once you sort of look down that path for education, you realise that it's very much like doing outdoor ed teaches you to be able to teach other people how to do outdoor ed. And I love that for people that love that. But for me, I wanted to be a little bit further there. So I found that environmental science was kind of a nice way to incorporate being outside and still doing that theoretical component of research and study and all that sort of thing. So that's how I landed in environmental science. I did a double degree at RMIT before this one. So I did a Bachelor's of Environmental Science and a Bachelor's of Environment and Society. So Environment and Society, quick rundown on that one, is a degree that just sort of teaches you about sort of people's perceptions of the environment, people's perception of climate change. Land zoning was a really interesting subject I did, just to learn about how people use different areas. We did some economics, did some power and governance, all that sort of thing. And then in my environmental science course, I majored in environmental chemistry, which was really good. And then I took 6 months off, and then I was like, you know what? I want to do research. Let's go. So then, yeah, I enrolled in the Bachelor of Applied Science Honours and did this wonderful thesis.
Here we are.
And here we are.
So you obviously did well enough to qualify to do your honours. So
yes.
Well done on that.
Thank you.
It's no small feat to get to the point where you're able to have that opportunity. So
Yeah.
Indeed.
So when you finish this, did you expect it to be discussed in the New South Wales Parliament?
Absolutely not.
Do you know it was discussed in the New South Wales Parliament?
Yeah, I got a call from Steve while I was at a work event. He messaged me and he was like, hey, I have some really exciting news for you. And I was like, okay. So then I took a step outside from the work event. He's like, oh, like your thesis has just basically been summarised in Parliament.
Yes.
And I was like, what?
Bit of a shock.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
so
fantastic.
surprising. You know, when you write a thesis, you kind of think, let's be honest, you're going to submit it to RMIT and no one's ever going to see it
Then
again.
it sits on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
I've got a couple sitting in a bookshelf at home, yeah.
Yeah, so this has been really wonderful.
And Steve, you're obviously you're Emma's supervisor and helped on the field work.
Yes.
Your journey to RMIT, doing what you do.
Well-
What's your title, first of all, I suppose?
I'm a lecturer, but I've got a rather mixed background in terms of where I've come from. I originally did my undergrad and honours thesis in zoology at the University of Melbourne. But the time I graduated, the Kennett government had just come in and sort of sacked a third of the people in the Department of Environment. And I had a young family, so I went off and worked for a while and then came back. And through my work, I'd worked for a drug company. So I came back and did some research in an area called structural biology in the Department of Medicine at Melbourne Uni, and then moved into drug discovery and then joined RMIT in about 2019 in the Department of Chemistry and Environmental Science. And I've been coming back to my roots and lecturing in environmental science. And so originally I did my honours topic in population monitoring, particularly the helmeted honeyeater bird. So
Yes.
developing and testing mathematical models for estimating populations. And so we looked at doing the same for deer. So that was the
Well,
route
there's a
back into
definite
it.
crossover there. Some of the control programs that I manage and work on are around the helmeted honeyeater. So
All right.
there's a bit of a link there.
And the
Very
the
good.
Bunyip deer study pen on the Bunyip Creek there at Tonnenbuck sort of also doubled as a base for HEHO for one of the repopulation programs many years ago. So
Oh,
It's
excellent.
funny. There's
Yeah.
a definite crossover there.
Yeah, I was in Yellingbo at the time, and at
yeah.
the time that was the only population apart from Hillsville Sanctuary. And the Hillsville Sanctuary population that was penned, they inadvertently killed almost all of them twice. And I think that's where they realised they really did need to establish colonies outside in natural settings so that they weren't prone to a single disaster. Like
Well, the habitat stuff done in Yellingbo is where one of the deer control programs was, and then there was another one in Listerfield.
Yes, I used to see deer at Yellingbo sometimes.
There's some interesting stuff
There you
with
go.
training them to avoid goshawks and stuff too, I believe. We're digressing.
It's fascinating. It's just weird how these things cross over.
Yeah.
Yes, isn't it?
You had an interest in them for years, so they wanted hunting you. So,
Very good.
anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about deer. So, what led you to choose this particular project, Emma?
Yeah, so I really wanted to step out of my comfort zone. So obviously, like I said, I majored in environmental chemistry. So a lot of my stuff was water and soil-based monitoring and understanding those structures. And I kind of wanted to do something more biology-oriented or ecology-orientated. And I've always had an interest in non-native species in Australia and their impacts on native species, and then as well how we're managing those sorts of things. When I joined the first information session for honours, there was a wonderful list of projects, and this project was on there. And it was like, I can't remember what you had it titled, but it said something about deer and in Victoria and their impacts, and I was like, perfect.
That sounds easy.
That's exactly what I'm interested in. You know, managing those sort of populations is really interesting. So that's how I ended up here. Yeah.
That's how you ended up in the New South Wales Parliament.
Been on a podcast with us. There you go.
Emma got in touch with me, and the first question I asked her, "Are you fit?"
Yeah.
As would be all outdoors in the mountains.
So you already had a fair idea of what the project was going to look like, is that right, Steve?
Yes. So the project arose really. The other thing I probably haven't even said, I actually also hunt deer and have done for over 30 years.
Well, you're a good bloke. Yeah.
we didn't get that bit.
Originally rose from hunting at Eildon and driving back along the road to Eildon Township.
Where you see all the deer.
Well, I didn't see any deer per se because it was the middle of the day, and this was a long time ago, so it was back in the early 2000s, and I think it was probably really on the tail end of the drought. But what I saw as I drove back was that the vegetation got thinner and thinner, and that always stuck in my mind. And I thought it would be interesting to do a study looking at the deer densities in the hunting and the non-hunting zone and to compare the vegetation between the two. So that was in the back of my mind for a long time. And then having got back into an environmental department where I could do that type of research, I advertised the project. And so it's kind of gone from there.
Oh, very good. So there's three sort of broad themes in the research, I suppose, which is the deer density and hunting, that relationship, the vegetation between two control areas, I suppose, hunting and non-hunting area, and public attitudes to deer hunting, which has attracted a lot of attention, I know, within the hunting community. We'll start with the deer density. Interested in, so you use camera traps. Can you want to talk us through sort of the methodology
absolutely.
and...
Yeah, so easy. So we went out 3 steps back actually. So we went and I went online and used the ARI's. They have like a model that basically randomly generates points for you to place cameras. So I used that random generated model to put 12 cameras in the hunting zone and 12 in the non-hunting zone. So they were randomly generated. We had to do a little bit of an adjustment just so that it was feasible to actually get to the points, but we made sure that they were all about 150 metres away from major roads and paths and that sort of thing.
So the purpose there, it's not like people like us setting up a camera to get heaps
Correct.
of cool pics.
We were not aiming for deer, but we were also not aiming for deer, if that makes sense. So we're trying to make sure that it was as neutral as possible in terms of bias. And then we went out for 3 days and deployed the cameras. So when you deploy the cameras, you put them at about hip height at a tree facing south.
Mm-hmm.
And you basically do a cute little walk. So they're motion detected, right? And they've got this thing where there's, I'd say, 6 points on the camera. And if a heat source travels across 2 of the points, it'll take a picture. To do the modelling that we had to do, we basically had to make reference points at 2.5 metres, 5, 7.5 and 10. So you've got to do a cute little dance with your tape measure and your distance number. So there's a whole bunch of pictures of me just holding up signs. We set all of those cameras and then we left them out there for, it's either 75 or 90 days, I can't remember. a long period of time, at least 2 months. And then we came back and collected all those cameras, transferred all of the photos off of the cameras onto a hard drive, and then in Lightroom, I used image tagging to just identify how many deer were in the picture, what distance they were from the camera. Based on those reference photos, I was able to gauge their distance. You basically bin them, so if they're like 0 to 2.5, 2.5 to 5, that sort of thing. And then all of that data was then put into some magical land. The ARI really did help me with the data modelling. And then that file was then used in R, which then read a script that basically popped out a wonderful abundance number.
So how many pictures are we talking about?
There was about 20,000 pictures
20,000
that I went
files.
through. Yeah, I had a really great time. It was pretty good. So the cameras shot in like a burst of 5. So basically for the burst of 5, the first distance that the deer was, you'd be able to identify, cool, there's a deer in this one. Unless suddenly another animal felt the need to come in.
That was the next question. What else did you find?
There was some really interesting
The
stuff.
Yeti? Did you get the Eildon Yeti?
I did not. There was quite a few feral dogs out
Yes.
there. I had a lot of fun with the wombats. God, I love them
seem to
so
love the cameras,
much.
don't they?
Yeah, and they're just so
Those hang
beautiful. I'm a massive fan of a wombat. A couple koalas walking along the ground, which is always fun.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of possums. I actually think the possums were there just to make fun of me at some point. So I was like, I feel like you know what this is. A lot of lyrebirds as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so there was a lot of other stuff.
Anything unexpected?
Oh, I had a hunter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that in the hunting or the non-hunting area?
It was in the hunting zone,
That's all
actually.
right.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's
That's
actually
good.
been a comment by. So we collaborate with the Arthur Ryler Institute with Dave Ramsey.
Oh, you do.
So
Dave.
we're, as part of a wider project, and he actually did make the comment. You know, there's the hunters are very compliant lot. I mean, they're doing a hunting
They have
versus
to be.
no hunting. Well, and I said, look, it's
Exactly.
not a random sample. You're looking at people who've no criminal records, so you'd expect that to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. So the differences you observed between your control area and the hunting area in deer density were quite stark.
Yeah. So per square metre, I think in the non-huntings, it was 2.31 deer per square metre.
Square
Wait.
kilometre?
Yes.
Square.
Oh my God, imagine if it was 2.3.
That'd be a lot.
Hunting a bit easier.
Standing on top of each other.
You guys would be having a blast out there, honestly. I'm sorry, in the hunting zone, it was 2.31 deer per square kilometre, and in the non-hunting zone, it was 8.6. I'm pretty sure. I think you've got it in front of you
Yep,
there.
8.61.
Yeah, it's right in there. So it was very clearly different, and I could tell that when I was tagging the images too. Like just the volume difference. I'm pretty sure, like in the hunting zone, once again I think it's in there somewhere, but in the hunting zone there was like 5,000-ish images, and in the non-hunting zone there was like 15,000. So it was pretty, yeah.
So that would correspond with anecdotal reports, but it's really interesting to get the actual science and the evidence to back that sort of position up. So
Yeah, and just having the number there is just so much easier to be able to explain that sort of thing. Like you can take somebody out there, but like when we were out there I'd say we were out there for a total of 9 days because we had to go out a couple of weeks before we deployed our cameras to learn how to deploy the cameras. In those 9 days, I think we saw maybe 2 deer.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't even remember where they were, if I'm quite honest with you, but that's hard to be able to show somebody that like, hey, it's clearly different. When you've got numbers there from camera traps, it's just, you can't kind of ignore that sort
The
of
fact that you
information.
saw 2 deer during the day crashing around was
probably you've done well.
good. Yeah,
because-
Yeah.
you've done pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the methods which are developed for getting deer numbers are developed in North America, where you'd walk a line transect and you'd just measure how many deer you saw and their distance from the line.
Yeah, good luck with that.
But yes, with samba, they're too evasive. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, you
Especially
average
where you were.
the average research. Yes, I
The straight
if
line's not so straight.
Well, difficult to do for
Yeah.
a start,
Yeah.
and then the deer would simply evade you without you even knowing it.
Yeah.
So that would breach the fundamental assumption of the model. So we have to use different methods.
Yeah.
Works with quail, but yeah, not,
Yes,
not, so,
yeah.
not so
Not
good
with
on
Samba.
deer.
Yeah.
So I mean, we don't want to overcook it, but
That's okay.
these findings suggest a pretty clear relationship between recreational hunting and deer density. I know there's been some previous research that was actually vegetation research up in the Yarra Ranges National Park that
Yeah.
wasn't
I've
setting
read
out
that.
to show that at all, but that sort of made the same inference. So I think we can safely say that it suggests a pretty strong relationship between hunting pressure
Yeah.
and density.
So, I mean, the way that science works, as you probably know, is that you never try and prove something.
Yeah.
You always try and disprove it. So, the hypothesis is that hunting suppresses deer numbers. The null hypothesis is that it doesn't, and the study supports the hypothesis, not the null hypothesis. Now, there's, the choice of location was important because we could only, in an honours year, we could only do so much. We could really only study one matched pair. So we picked two sites which are close to each other, hunting and non-hunting, where the vegetation is going to be very similar because of their proximity in terms of their aspect and so on. And we also left a buffer zone in between just in case, just to sort of avoid edge effects, maybe slightly more deer next to the non-hunting side, so forth. But I mean, the study does need to be more widely replicated. I think the findings are very strongly in support of our hypothesis, but it is being undertaken. So I'm in the Arthur Rylah Institute. Emma's data will go in a study with the data from the Arthur Rylah Institute, which are replicating this across multiple sites in Victoria as well.
I don't think you could have picked a better site. It's a fabulous site. Maybe a King Lake, Talangi type area, but somewhere like that where you've got that high hunter density and there's a fair bit of hunting pressure in that Eildon area.
Yes,
as opposed to the national park.
Other bit has none. Jerusalem Creek, it's
everyone knows it.
Yeah, you drive in and out of Jerusalem Creek like I have hundreds of times, and I've seen deer standing on the roundabout at Eildon when you turn off onto the road there.
Yes, the locals complain quite a bit.
Yeah, I've seen them on the footy oval. I've seen them on that roundabout. So
yeah. Which was also part of the reasoning for choosing it, is that the locals complain so much. One of the things that I kind of wish government agencies did a little bit more was actually go and talk to the locals about their views on things instead of making decisions at a sort of state-based level. In that regard, that was also part of the reason for choosing Eildon, to sort of look at what the locals thought, and hence that was part of our idea of doing a public opinion survey.
All right, well, and we'll get to, let's just move into the public opinion survey, and we can circle back to vegetation, I suppose. So,
sure.
From what we've been able to find, it's really the first published Australian research that examines public opinion on deer hunting, which, given the scale and the history of deer hunting, is quite surprising.
It is. It was the first one. I mean, I didn't know of any. I got Emma to go and do a thorough check.
I could not find any.
Couldn't find anything whatsoever.
There could be one that was unpublished, but.
The idea from doing it arose from a study that I read in the Journal of Wildlife Management a long time ago, back when I was doing my thesis, which looked at deer numbers in different counties of a state in the US, where they were getting a lot of complaints about high deer numbers. And they went and did a survey of the people in the different districts. And what they found was that even in the districts where they were getting the most complaints, the people thought the deer numbers were about right. And that the complaints were coming from a few specific farmers at a few specific locations. And they rightly decided we don't need to do anything in terms of changing the management of the deer. We just need a little bit of targeted culling perhaps at those farms. So part of the thinking was, you hear lots of anti-hunting opinion, but is that really the case? Or is it just a vocal minority? What do most people think? You can't necessarily infer what most people think just by the noise made by some very loud people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we go to a lot of sort of deer forums and things, community meetings, and you get a lot of that. You get a few people there making a big noise about how deer are impacting them, and then you actually come up with some solutions. And it's amazing how many people then don't have a problem because they don't want to implement the solutions. They want to talk about it. They want to say, and quite often it'll be that there's been 2 deer seen sort of once every 6 weeks walking through their paddock. So when you actually start drilling down and look at what the majority of people are experiencing, it's different to that squeaky wheel.
Yeah, and so that was part of the aim of our study, was to really get some numbers on what people are really thinking and how many people think that. But I mean, a big part of our study as well was because we're doing a social media study, we're not doing, it's promulgated by social media. so there's always a sort of potential for, in this type of study, for sort of capture by interest group, which is no bad thing. I mean, if people are interested in deer, you want to hear from them, whether that's adversely impacted or that they hunt deer. You want to hear from those people. So we also asked a series of questions about people's backgrounds, where they live. Did they come from a hunting, fishing family? Did they donate to environmental organisations?
And the crossover on that was
fascinating.
Yeah, it was.
Not a great surprise, I suppose, to the three of us, because that's the world we live in, and hunters tend to be naturalists. But 34% sort of crossing over that are hunting affiliated and that are donating to environmental charities. So
yes, I think you'd probably think in your head that these are distinct groups.
I was going to say, normally in your head you would separate the two. So that crossover was really interesting for me to see. It was also really interesting. So one of our main findings, if you go over a couple pages, is that we found that actually there was no real difference between those who only donated environmentally, those who hunted and donated environmentally, and those who hunted. They all tend to have the same opinion in terms of their agreement towards increasing those hunting zones, and that was that they were in support of that sort of thing. The only difference was the group of people that did neither, and we kind of put that to possibly not being outside as much, so not really having any strong feelings towards the...
Yeah, and a bit of a correlation with the more active you are as a user of public land, the more likely you are to support other people using public land. And the opposition, it's easy for us to fall into the goat's cheese curtain sort of trope, but the opposition seems to be coming from people who don't actually go to the parks that they're talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think we did sort of try and break those groups up into frequency of use. And I think we found similar that those who used the parks the least had I don't think they were opposed to it, but they had the least strong opinion. They just sat really more in the middle of neither support nor oppose. I think it's a couple pages back, but which was really interesting.
The other thing that struck me, which was no real surprise given the media narrative, particularly in Victoria, around deer, but a bit of a surprise given that it didn't cross over into a lack of support for hunting, which was the large amount of people who think that 57%, I think, that think that there's too many deer in Victoria. I know it's a very simple question, but that level of public perception didn't really surprise us.
I think, in some ways, the two issues are very related. The national parks and the perception of too many deer. Obviously we saw that there are more deer in our non-hunting zone than in the hunting zone. But also just the way that a lot of the land use is configured. So for example, if you take Eildon, the non-hunting zone is close to town. The hunting zone's away from town. Now, the people who are saying that there's too many deer, of course, are the people in town. And from their perspective, there probably are too many deer because that's a zone.
When they're in your front yard. One's too many, isn't it?
That's what like the lady at the cafe who said, we asked her opinions on deer and she said, "Oh, don't talk to me about deer. They're eating my garden."
Yeah, I've lost my roses,
yeah. And that's what they care about. And of course, they're living next to the non-hunting zone. And so the perception of there being, whereas if you asked a hunter who's trying to find 2.3 deer in a square kilometre,
there might not be enough
there might not be enough deer.
With gradients of 55%.
Yes. So, I think they're related. And, the way that we've sort of, we've always assumed in Victoria that people don't like hunting, and our evidence doesn't support that. But we assume that they don't like hunting and that they don't want hunting close to towns or properties. But then on the flip side, that means that you've got perhaps too many deer in those zones, and they're moving out of those zones onto private property, causing accidents or close to causing accidents on roads, eating people's gardens, eating people's crops.
I think there's also something to be said for people that feel that there's too many deer, but they don't agree with hunting as a concept. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how to... I'm not going to gently broach that statement here in this room.
I don't want the deer, but I don't want you to shoot
exactly.
them.
So like a lot
no
of
magic
people,
solution.
a lot of people that I'm going to generalize here.
Yeah,
Scary.
That's what
knock yourself out.
Yeah, like a lot of people that are like from cities or bigger towns that don't really go out all that much to the bush, for example. They're a bit more sheltered in terms of how things work in life and that sort of thing. So they don't like the idea of animals dying in general. You know, the David Attenborough documentary would upset them, sort of thing. So they can see that there's an issue from like perceived impacts of deer, like, oh, vegetation is, like you said, how you visually saw that there was thinned out vegetation. They can see that's a problem. They can acknowledge that there might be too many deer in an area, but they don't actually have a solution for how they would like those deer managed.
And it really comes down to that. We keep banging on about the need for nuance in this conversation. It's this question of, how many deer in Victoria? Well, who cares? That doesn't matter. What are the impacts in the local area?
Yes.
How many deer in that local area is what matters, not how many there are in the state.
Yeah, and I think that's something that public policy needs to catch up on. That we need to be more locally responsive, and as part of that, take the opinions of the locals as well. I mean, it's not too difficult. It's not easy to do public opinion surveys, but it's not too difficult to get a picture of what's going on in a local area. So I mean, there's no reason why programs can't be more local. I mean, I guess the other big thing we found, having said that, I mean, you comment that you get people with these, illogical views of, we need to control deer numbers, but we don't want to kill them. We really did find that that's a vanishingly small number of people really in our survey, though.
Yeah, because I think the people that did our survey were people that were consciously aware of deer as a concept. And regardless of what their opinion was, they all had an opinion on the matter. It would be a very different survey if we had 400 people telling us that they didn't really care about the issue.
Yeah. But we did have some of those in the survey.
We did. With the most love, some of my friends obviously did the survey to support me, but they didn't even know that there were deer in Victoria, for example. But I think it's important to capture those people as well, right?
Sure.
Because they're still part of the population of Victoria, and some people just don't even know that there's deer here.
Yeah.
No, a lot of people.
But what we found with that group was that they were just down the middle in terms of whether they didn't know the numbers. Did they support increasing or decreasing hunting access? We don't know.
Yeah, there was very much
honestly just neutral.
There was no disagreement to the idea, which was kind of good to see. I think.
That most people were pretty reasonable. They didn't know. They had very little opinion on it.
And that perception and its tie into impacts sort of leads back to, I suppose, the answer of why you did the vegetation monitoring segment. Or
yeah, well, that was kind of interesting because it was my reason for doing the survey in the first place, and the one thing that turned out to be non-significant.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
So, what we did at each site was we did a rapid vegetation analysis. Maybe Emily, you want to talk?
Yes,
we
did a rapid vegetation assessment at each camera. So we ended up doing 24 individual rapid vegetation assessments. So at each tree that the camera was attached to, we basically split the surrounding 10-metre area into quadrats for each cardinal direction. And then we did just like a really quick scan over what type of percentage of coverage was basically what was assessed. So percentage of coverage of native non-woody, native woody vegetation, bracken, we split into its own group because not normally a deer feed plant, but we still wanted to just sort of see its coverage. The percentage of bare ground, is there only 4?
Exotics, which we didn't have.
Exotics, but there was no exotic vegetation there, which was nice to see actually. Especially because deer tend to be credited for moving that sort of weed around. So that was really interesting to see. But yeah, there was none at any of our sites. But yeah, so we found that there was no statistical significance between the hunting and the non-hunting zones in terms of vegetation coverage of any kind, except for there was a changing, bracken, which, like we've said before, is not commonly expected to be a deer feed plant. So you don't expect them to have any impact on that difference.
So, I mean, we talk about, that's what you can anecdotally see and what the need for research is. Sometimes you can be wrong.
Doesn't matter.
So, I mean, I drove down that road in probably a drought year when the deer were pressing down to the dam to get a drink as well as feed, and probably were denuding the vegetation in a drought year close to the lake. probably correct, and it certainly seemed correct to my eyes. But in a non-drought year, randomly sampling throughout the hunting and non-hunting areas, no difference in food plants.
Because this whole impact thing is, everyone is concerned about deer impacting on the Victorian environment, and rightly so. We need to be concerned about that. But it's interesting that 2.31 deer per square kilometre and deer at 8.61 per square kilometre had no difference. So if we're saying that deer are having impacts and we need to be controlling deer and allocating sort of scarce resources to do that, I think that carrying capacity and trying to work out what that actually is and at what level deer are actually having a negative impact before we necessarily need to start sort of putting that action in there. So it's really good to actually see some objective study done on this, because it might actually blow some perceptions out of the water and lead to further study.
Because it is quite a high population.
It's quite high. The opening line of Emma's thesis, I think, captures it quite nicely, where she says that, that knowing deer numbers is very important for land management. Because if you don't have the numbers, what limit do you set as a threshold?
What are you managing?
For acceptable levels.
And obviously, deer hunting in Victoria is a recreational activity that I'm sure you'll enjoy partaking in, which is great. Love that. So we obviously don't want to completely get rid of the deer. We just want to get them to a point where I would say the perceived impacts are reduced. So obviously, we weren't able to find a quantitative impact on vegetation, but we still have landholders and people in towns like Eildon saying that there are direct impacts on them by deer. So although we couldn't find that, there's obviously some sort of, in the 8.6 deer per square kilometres, there is still impacts to that effect, right? We just need to find the number where people in towns near those sorts of areas are feeling that they're not as greatly impacted.
But like I said before, one deer in your front yard
exactly.
is one deer too many.
It's a significant impact.
It depends where they are.
Someone who's trying to grow a nice garden.
Eat your roses, you're right there.
We put a lot of effort into that growing.
And it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the areas where it is really challenging, that peri-urban sort of interface and the edge of towns and things like that, where rec hunting isn't sort of an option in a lot of cases. And that's where you get those impacts.
There are potentials there. If it was the US, of course, you'd be bow hunting.
Yeah. Well, we have discussed those sort of
and we did ask in our survey whether people supported. One of the striking things for our survey, we not only asked whether people supported expanding the hunting zones, but we also asked about the types of hunting that they'd prefer to have. And the most favoured one was recreational hunting with a rifle. The second most favoured, and probably insignificantly
was
different,
recreational hunting with bows.
Yeah, recreational hunting with bow.
And then people were found to favour the concept of contracted hunting, like government-funded aerial culling or hiring people to hunt deer, substantially less than the concept of people recreationally hunting.
The social licence of it's much lower. I remember there was I'll get the area wrong, it might have been the Murrumbidgee in New South Wales. There was a land care survey 10 or so years ago that looked at that, and even amongst landholders who were significantly impacted by deer, the idea of the deer being shot to waste
had
I think
very,
that is
very low
absolutely
support.
what it is.
Yeah, but I know when you did your lit search, you found that the studies in Denmark and
America,
that people were largely in favour of hunting if the animal was being used. So, the only control method that was actually really disfavoured was helicopter culling.
Yeah.
And we didn't ask why, but
you can, from previous research in Denmark and America, part of that is the ethics of the ethical conversation of, like, if you're aerial culling, are you less likely to, aim? Are you going to aim? Probably not. You've got less vested interest in the success of your hunting, right? You're paid the same, from my understanding. Are they paid per deer? No. They're paid per hour, right?
Yeah.
So you don't actually really, in the most polite way, you're less likely to care about if you hit the deer properly or not, versus if you're going out recreationally, that's your whole aim. And I think people also, I think something needs to be said for the fact that people support other people enjoying themselves. Yes. And I feel like that's, not talked about very much in my thesis. But
we're not allowed to say that people enjoy hunting.
But like,
it's great
I'm all in favour of people doing things that they enjoy recreationally. Like you guys love the Tour de France, right? You enjoy watching people cycle because...
Daryl loves the Tour de France.
You love watching people cycle because it's something that they love to do. And I'm a massive fan of supporting people doing things that they love to do. And it's like when you watch the 18-year-old play footy for the first time in the AFL. It's just like beautiful, right? And so I think people all have that sort of sentiment of like, we want people to enjoy what they want to enjoy. And hunting is one of those things. So I think there's that part too.
All right. That's a really good summary of it all.
No, it's awesome.
What questions do you think that your project raised that are going to lead to further research or should lead to further research?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my project has come up with a very nice, gentle baseline of information. Obviously, it's only gone 2 sites, 1 area, 1 time period, right? Only 1 season, which was done strategically because then we were able to directly compare the two and nobody could turn around and be like, hey, what is it because it's in spring? And it's like, well, spring has nothing to do with the fact because they were against each other. Studying that area across multiple years would be beneficial. The ARI studies, they're doing one in Eildon and then a couple more elsewhere.
These are the GMA.
Yeah.
Yes.
The GMA.
And they're across 3 years. So I think that's a really good, solid bit of work that you'll be able to come up with a really nice number.
Is that the stuff Chris Davies is working on?
Yes, that's right. Yes, with David Ramsey from ARI. They're also doing a study, a before and after study at the Snowy and Errinundra.
Yeah.
Yes.
So seeing if that changes
that'll be
deer
interesting.
hunting. It will be.
I think something that would be really interesting is comparing the data from this and the GMA's game hunting estimates. So I wrote in my thesis about how the GMA calls hunters and asks them how many deer they've bagged for, I think it's the month or something, and they come out with an estimate of how many deer have been shot in the year.
Yep.
And they're interesting. It's really comprehensive paper, but the discrepancy there compared to
they don't add up.
Yeah, the discrepancy
up.
there compared to this data it's quite large because you can't have hunted a certain number and then also my estimate of population is the exact same number because then we'd have no deer. So I think it wouldn't work, right? So I think delving into that further would be really, really good.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, that one, because I think we can be confident in comparing the ARI numbers against themselves each year.
Yes.
Because that's a consistent. We can compare the hunting numbers against themselves over
Absolutely.
time too. So that can give you the trends. But I think whether the harvest estimates are overestimated or I think probably the camera trap estimates are under would be my guess because and those cameras, and particularly with Samba, the way they actually utilise the environment, you would need the cameras out basically over 12 months because even on a weekly basis, Samba will use the environment in different ways and they'll move through that environment. So it's very easy for that to either get a lot of deer if they're there at that particular week or time, or you get none, and that's not necessarily reflective. And because they're not evenly spread throughout the environment, and I'm no scientist, but this seems to assume that there's that even spread across the environment when they do the camera traps, and that's simply not the case.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a concern, but the cameras are generally done in the same month of spring, and the deer have got to be somewhere. So that's probably less of a concern to me in terms of their accuracy. It's a good point of contention. To me, the biggest weakness of the model is related to that, but just diurnal, just the patterns of activity during the day. This is it's a mathematical, you'll understand it as hunters, but it's a mathematical correction that we have to do, is that deer have different patterns of activity during the day. And we don't capture bedded deer on the cameras. Samba being Samba, even if the camera was located at a bedding site, I don't think a Samba would sit down in front of it. They're just any sort of foreign object there, and that wouldn't do that.
Pretty highly tuned prey.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have to assume that we only see deer when they're active, and so we have to make a correction. So when we're modelling the deer density, we have to actually fit what's called a kernel function, which is just a shape to the pattern of activity that we see. And we have to sort of multiply up the density estimates for the times of the day we don't detect many deer. But what do we multiply them up to? So what we do is we assume that at the time of day where we detect the most deer, that all the deer are active. Right, and so in our study it was like
6 a.m. So
6 a.m.
the assumption of the model is that every single deer in that area was active and busy at 6 a.m.
It's probably not a bad assumption.
It's not a terrible
it's
assumption.
reasonable from what we've seen.
It's not the worst, but I think it does make a limitation to the study in terms of like, I don't expect every single deer right now to be having a dance party at 6 a.m.
6
You know what I mean?
o'clock, let's
Time to get up,
So,
guys.
so let's say only half the deer, I mean, it's probably more than half, but let's say only half the deer are active at 6 a.m. That will mean that our population estimate is out by 50%.
Yeah.
And we don't know the proportion of deer. I mean, you could do something like radio tags some deer and see what proportion are active.
Which is what we're doing with waterfowl in Victoria.
Yeah, but
you know when they're moving because they've got GPS trackers on them.
yeah, so that's for me. That's my guess. It's only a guess as to why I think the density estimate's too low by camera traps. The hunter side, again, this is only guesses, but I mean, I think hunters might sometimes misunderstand the question and include some deer that they've been contracted to cull, perhaps, maybe. I think the other one is just simply a little bit of memory bias. You know, you ask her how many deer you shot in the last month. I mean, I love deer hunting and I go out regularly, but I tend to remember the hunts where I shoot deer.
Sure.
And if it was 5 or 6 weeks back, it might feel to me like it was 3 weeks back. And so I think we're just likely to include 5 or 6 weeks into 4, and that would give
I think that harvest data is fairly robust. It's been reviewed numerous times.
To the extent that it's wrong the same every year.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think that statement's correct.
like you
But there
said
could be
before.
if for example we as hunters remember and accidentally include things up to 6 weeks, then it's going to be 50% too high.
Humans are consistently inaccurate if we're inaccurate.
And that's
Well,
okay.
well, what we do is we remember highlights, and that's the way our memory works. So, but I mean, having said that, the one time that I got surveyed, I forgot to include the only deer I shot a month. So, I mean, there's,
You might have evened it out. So.
Yeah.
So it's your fault.
All right. Well, coming to the end, is there anything you wished we'd asked you that we didn't, either of you?
Not for me.
not particular. I mean, I think that sort of captures the research nicely. I mean, you asked about areas of field of future research. I mean, you mentioned peri-urban. I think that is an interesting area that could be researched. As I mentioned, I think that in the United States, there's lots of peri-urban hunting. I mean, it's if you watch a YouTube of hunting from America, you can always hear traffic in the background.
Yeah.
And some of the hunting is done very close to houses, particularly with bows and arrows. Our survey found good support for bow and arrow hunting, and it could be something that's actually used in peri-urban environments to keep deer numbers in check. But it's I think it's again there's an assumption that maybe it wouldn't be supported, but the data says it is.
No, that's
No, it's really interesting. And this is why this is so valuable, to actually get some data, because we all have our perceptions and ideas of how we think things are, to actually get some evidence about how it is. And I'm really keen to see this sort of used as a base, and then somebody else go on and do some more research into these areas, because it's actually quite fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I think that the encouraging thing is that there really loud voices aside, there really isn't public opposition to deer hunting, at least in our
from what we
research.
found.
It's actually very supportive of recreational hunting, and people want the national parks opened up more for hunting, and recreational hunters should be the tools used to keep the deer numbers at reasonable levels.
That's our social media clip right there.
I think you'll get too many arguments from us.
You'll be seeing that. Besides sweating on your mark for this,
We'll work
Sure,
on that.
guys, I get it next Monday.
it's
Getting better all the time, trust me.
if we're marking it, you've done very well.
Thank you.
What's next for you, Emma?
I'm currently working as an environmental technician at a gold mine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed starting in mining. It's really interesting in terms of the diversity of work that I get the opportunity to do. So it's a lot of
Around Bendigo?
yeah.
Well,
So
coming
it's,
from Bendigo, it's a really good career.
yeah, it's called Fosterville Gold Mine. So it's 20 minutes out of Bendigo. So I'm currently looking at a fox baiting program to work on fox management, similar type situation in terms of non-native species in Australian environments. But yeah, I do a lot of noise monitoring, air quality, soil, water, all that fun stuff. So I'm really lucky in terms of the breadth of stuff I get to work on. And then eventually I think I'll come back and do a PhD.
The PhD's on the horizon.
In deer?
Yeah, possibly. This has been really interesting, and I would love to build on the knowledge that I have successfully produced, I'll say.
Well, the door's always open, Emma. I think you've done a fantastic
There you
job.
go.
Yeah, we've got that on film too. So.
I'll pop back in 3 years, guys.
Talk about funding now, and you have that conversation.
When we planned this study, I mean, I said, I was talking to colleagues. I said, well, we want to do a vegetation, we want to do a deer density, we want to do a public opinion survey, and they across the board said that's 3 different honours students.
Yeah. No, you got
3 in one.
One really hard-working honest
one very
student.
hard-working.
All right, I think that's a very high point to leave it on. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back pretty soon, I think, with some more newsy, drier stuff. I won't say it's boring because we want you to tune into the next one. So please do all the really good things. Please like, share, subscribe, follow us on all the socials, all that great stuff. And thanks again for joining us. Thanks heaps, Emma and Steve. Really appreciated the chat. And thanks, Dave and Daryl. Another nearly 3 weeks to go of the tour, Daryl. Will Poggy stay in the yellow for the whole 3 weeks?
Oh, he's going to try.
He's going to try. If he can stay upright, I think he might.
He's going to try.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.